When the traveling fair came to the dusty frontier town, everyone gathered as if it were the biggest event of the year. Farmers, ranchers, children, and even old folks from nearby valleys came riding their wagons and horses. The air was full of music, laughter, and the smell of roasted corn. But one tent drew more attention than any other. It had a tall sign painted in red that said, "The Apache Giantess, tallest woman of the desert." People formed a long line to see what was inside. Some went out of curiosity, but others came to laugh. They expected a strange show, something they could talk about for weeks. Inside, sitting on a wooden stool, was Noka, a tall young woman with long black hair braided down her back. Her deep brown eyes looked calm but sad. She was an Apache, far from her homeland and her people. The men who ran the fair had found her years ago and convinced her to join them. They told her she could make money, but instead they used her as a showpiece. She stood 6 feet and 3 inches tall, strong and graceful. To the crowd she looked different, and that was enough for them to stare. The owners made her wear bright clothes and sit under lights while they told stories about her height. People laughed and whispered things she couldn't understand. Every laugh felt heavy, but she stayed quiet. She sent part of her small earnings to her younger brother who lived on the reservation. That was her only reason to keep going. On the third afternoon, a cowboy rode into town. His name was Luke Harlan. He was known as a quiet man who didn't like crowds. He lived alone on the open plains, miles away from the nearest ranch. He came to town only when he needed supplies, and he usually left as soon as he could. But this time, something made him stop. He heard laughter coming from the fairground and saw people gathered around the tent. Out of curiosity, he walked closer. Inside, the tent was hot and crowded. He pushed through until he could see her. The moment his eyes met Noka's, the noise faded. She didn't look strange to him. She looked proud, tired, and lonely. Her posture was straight, her hands calm, but her eyes were full of quiet pain. He watched for a moment as the man in charge, short man in a red vest, shouted to the crowd, "Step right up, folks. See the tallest woman west of the river. She can lift a wagon wheel with one hand." The crowd laughed. Some clapped, others shouted jokes. Then the man in the red vest pointed at Luke. "Hey, cowboy, how about a test of strength? Think you can beat the giantess?" People cheered, waiting for him to accept. But Luke just looked at the showman and said calmly, "No, sir. I don't wrestle for laughs." The tent went quiet for a second. Then someone from the back shouted, "He's scared." Laughter filled the tent again, but Luke ignored it. He looked at Noka, tipped his hat respectfully, turned to leave. That one small act, tipping his hat, stayed with her all day. No one had ever looked at her that way. People usually looked with surprise or pity, but not with respect. She watched him leave and felt something strange, like warmth returning to a cold place inside her. That evening, after the fair closed and the crowd went home, Noka carried buckets of water to clean the area around her tent. The night wind was cold, and she wore only a thin shawl. The others sat around the fire, laughing and drinking. She worked alone, quietly. Suddenly she heard footsteps behind her. She turned quickly and saw the same cowboy from earlier. He carried a small bag and a tin cup. "Evening, ma'am," he said softly. She looked around nervously. "You shouldn't be here. The owner doesn't like strangers near his tent." "I'm not here for him," Luke said. He handed her the tin cup and a piece of bread. "You've had a long day. Thought you might need this." She stared at the food, confused. "Why would you do that?" He shrugged. "Because you look hungry." "That's reason enough." She hesitated but finally accepted it. The bread was warm. She took a small sip of the coffee. It had been a long time since anyone had shown her kindness. "Thank you," she whispered. They talked a little. She told him about her family and how she had no way to leave the fair. The men who ran the show took her pay and kept her papers. "I can't go home," she said quietly. "If I walk into town, people stare. If I go to the reservation, they'll think I'm ashamed of who I am." Luke listened without interrupting. His face stayed calm, but his eyes showed sadness. "No one should be treated like that," he said. "You could leave with me." I've got land up north. You'd be free there. She shook her head. I can't. They'd find me. And besides, I don't belong anywhere. Luke didn't argue. He just said softly, maybe one day you'll believe you do. Then he stood up, tipped his hat again, and left. That night, she lay awake in her tent. The stars above the thin canvas roof shone faintly, and she thought about his words. It was strange someone she had met only once had spoken to her like she mattered. The next morning, the man in the red vest counted the coins and shouted orders. Luke walked up to him near the tent. How much do you pay the Apache woman? He asked. The man laughed. She gets food, a place to sleep, and a few coins. What's it to you? She's not an animal in a cage, Luke said quietly. The man frowned. You talk like you care. Maybe you should buy a ticket if you want to talk to her again. Luke turned and walked away, but the look in his eyes made the man uneasy. That night, Noka was outside again, cleaning the last of the fair's equipment. Luke appeared once more, this time leading his horse. He didn't say much at first. He just stood beside her in silence. The moonlight touched her hair, and for the first time, she looked less like a sideshow act and more like who she really was, a strong young woman who had been trapped by other people's laughter. When was the last time you saw the desert without walls or tents? He asked quietly. She thought for a moment. Before the fair, she said softly. That feels like another life. There's a place up north, Luke said. No fences, no one to laugh. If you ever want to see it, I can take you. She looked at him, her voice unsure. Why would you help me? He smiled faintly. Because it's the right thing to do. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The wind blew across the empty fairground, carrying the smell of sagebrush. The town lights glowed in the distance. Finally, she whispered, no one ever talked to me like that. Luke looked at her gently. Then maybe it's about time someone did.
Ow.
Days passed, and the fair prepared to leave. The man in the red vest drank every night, shouting orders by day. One evening, Noka saw Luke waiting by the river with 2 horses. He didn't say a word, but she understood. She looked once more at the tent that had held her for years, and turned away. They rode north under the stars, the fairground fading behind them. The wind was cold, but Noka felt warm for the first time in years. The open land stretched before them, wide and quiet. When they stopped to rest near a small canyon, Luke made a small fire. They sat side by side, listening to the crackle. She told him stories from her childhood about her brother, about the dances and songs her grandmother taught her. Luke listened with quiet respect. At last she looked at him and said softly, You don't even know me. I don't need to. I just know you deserve better, eh? The night sky above them was full of stars. She closed her eyes, feeling something new hope. For the first time since she had joined the fair, she felt free, and though she didn't say it aloud, she knew this quiet cowboy had already changed her fate forever. The morning sun rose softly over the desert hills. The sky was golden, and the air smelled of dry grass and freedom. Noka and Luke rode slowly along a quiet trail that followed the river. The fair and its noise were far behind them now. For the first time in years, Noka could breathe without fear. She still felt unsure about what came next, but something in her heart was lighter. Luke rode beside her, silent but calm. He didn't ask many questions. He just watched the land and made sure she was safe. Every so often, he would glance at her and give a small nod, like he was saying, everything was going to be fine. She noticed the way he moved, steady, careful, and kind. It felt strange having someone care about her without wanting anything in return. They stopped near a stream by noon. Luke tied the horses and pulled out a small piece of bread and jerky from his saddlebag. Noka sat by the water and looked at her reflection. For the first time, she didn't see the Apache Giantess. She just saw a woman, tired but strong, with kind eyes and a brave heart. Luke handed her a cup of water. You all right? He asked. She nodded. I still can't believe I'm free. I keep thinking someone will come after me. No one's coming, Luke said softly. You're safe now. They won't look for you out here. She looked at him. Why did you help me? You could have just walked away. He smiled slightly. Maybe because I've been lonely too. I know what it's like to feel like you don't belong anywhere. They continued their journey north through wide-open plains and canyons. At night, they camped under the stars. Noka told stories of her people, about the songs that healed sadness and the old traditions her grandmother used to keep alive. Luke listened quietly, sometimes smiling at the way her voice softened when she spoke of home. After a few days, they reached Luke's ranch. It wasn't big, but it was peaceful. A small wooden house stood near a stream, surrounded by open fields and a few cattle. The air smelled of sage and pine. Luke helped her down from the horse and said, "It's not fancy, but it's home." Out. Noka looked around in silence. The land stretched endlessly in all directions. She had spent years trapped inside tents and crowds, and now, suddenly, she could see forever. She felt her chest tighten with emotion. Luke showed her a small room inside the house where she could stay. It had a bed, a table, and a window that looked toward the hills. "You can rest here for as long as you like," he said. "You don't owe me anything." She wanted to thank him, but the words caught in her throat. She just nodded and whispered, "I'll help you around the ranch. I can cook, mend clothes, or work the fences." Luke smiled. "Only if you want to. There's no debt here." In the days that followed, Noka worked beside Luke. She helped feed the animals, gather water, and fix broken boards on the barn. She learned how to ride properly and how to guide the cattle across the fields. She was strong, and Luke admired how quickly she learned everything. Sometimes, he caught himself watching her while she worked. There was something graceful in the way she moved, steady and sure, even after all she had been through. She was no longer the woman sitting on a stool, being laughed at. She was alive, free, and filled with quiet dignity. The nearby townspeople soon noticed that a tall Apache woman was living on Luke's land. Some whispered, others pointed. But when Luke came to town with her one afternoon to buy supplies, his calm confidence made everyone stop staring. He treated her like an equal, no jokes, no shame. He spoke to her kindly in front of everyone. At first, Noka kept her head down, nervous about the looks. But Luke said softly, "Don't hide. You've got nothing to be ashamed of." Slowly, she lifted her head and looked at the people around her. She didn't see laughter this time. She saw curiosity, maybe even respect. The blacksmith nodded politely. The woman at the general store smiled a little. Something had changed. Back at the ranch, Noka began to plant small patches of flowers near the fence. She said they reminded her of home. Luke watched her kneel in the dirt with a gentle expression. "You're bringing life to this place," he said. She smiled. "Maybe it's bringing life back to me too." Months passed, and the ranch began to look brighter. The grass grew greener, and the house felt warmer. Luke and Noka often shared stories at night by the fire. He told her about his childhood, about how he lost his parents when he was young and had to survive on his own. She listened quietly, her heart softening more with each story. One evening, while the sun was setting behind the hills, Noka stood on the porch and looked toward the horizon. The sky was painted orange and pink. Luke came to stand beside her. Neither spoke for a long time. Finally, she said softly, "Do you ever think people can change their fate?" Luke looked at her. "I think we can. Sometimes all it takes is one moment, one choice, one act of kindness." She turned toward him, her eyes shining. "Then maybe you changed mine." He didn't answer right away. He just smiled. "Maybe you changed mine too." As the months turned into a year, Noka became known in the nearby town not as the Giantess, but as Luke's Apache friend. People began to respect her for her hard work and calm nature. Children liked her because she always had kind words for them and told stories of the stars. Women came to her for advice on herbs and remedies she had learned from her grandmother. Slowly, laughter turned into admiration. One day, her younger brother arrived unexpectedly. He had grown older, stronger, and had come looking for her. When he saw her living freely and happily, he hugged her tightly. "I thought you were gone," he said. Noka smiled through her tears. "No, little brother. I finally found home." Luke welcomed him warmly and offered him a place to stay. The small ranch that once felt lonely now felt full of life. Together, they worked the land, repaired fences, and cared for the animals. As the years went on, Luke and Noka became inseparable. They weren't bound by words or promises, they were bound by respect and quiet understanding. The townspeople stopped talking about her height and started talking about her heart. One summer afternoon, a group of travelers stopped by the ranch. Among them was the same man who had once run the fair. He looked older, his red vest now faded. He recognized Noka at once and froze. But when he saw her standing tall beside Luke, dressed in clean clothes, smiling with peace in her eyes, he lowered his head and said nothing. Noka didn't speak either. She didn't need to. Her silence was stronger than any words. That night, she stood outside under the stars. The same stars she once looked at through a tent's thin roof now stretched across the endless sky. She felt free, strong, and grateful. Luke joined her quietly, placing a blanket over her shoulders. "You thinking about the past?" he asked. She nodded. "Sometimes I still hear the laughter, but it doesn't hurt anymore." He looked at her and said softly, "Because you turned it into something beautiful." She smiled. "No, Luke, you did. You saw me when no one else did." "No, I just gave you a chance. You're the one who made it mean something." The wind moved gently through the grass, and the night seemed to hold them in silence. The desert that once felt empty was now alive with the sound of crickets, the smell of sage, and the feeling of peace. And in that quiet place, far from crowds and laughter, Noka found what she had been searching for her whole life: freedom, respect, and the simple love of a man who never saw her as different. Her story spread slowly through the frontier, told by travelers and cowhands. They said the cowboy who once rode alone now lived with an Apache woman who taught him how to smile again, and those who once laughed at her name spoke it with kindness. The woman who was once a showpiece in a tent had become a symbol of courage and dignity, and the cowboy who had stopped to offer a cup of coffee became the man who changed her fate forever.